Say what you want about Elon Musk, but he's built some pretty revolutionary companies. PayPal, Tesla, SpaceX, all companies that have rewritten entire industries. And you already know the legend that travels with him. The 80-hour work weeks, the sleeping on the factory floor, the feuds, and the polarizing moments.
Somebody's gonna try to blackmail me with advertising? Blackmail me with money? Go f yourself.
But this video is about none of that. In this video, I want to crack open the CEO playbook of Elon Musk, and I want us to look at how he thinks about people, transformation, and growth. By the way, my name is Eric. I'm a keynote speaker and executive coach, and I work with organizations around the world to help their leaders become more transformational. So principle number one is the output of your company is the vector sum of your people. When OpenAI was being formed in 2015, Elon Musk wrote a note to the founding team that contained what might be one of the most important principles from a leadership perspective. He said, our most important consideration is recruitment of the best people. The output of any company is the vector sum of people within it, and if we are able to attract the most talented people over time, and our direction is correctly aligned, then OpenAI will prevail. This vector sum idea is pretty precise. Vectors have both magnitude and direction. And if you have people who are highly talented but pulling in different directions, then they really just cancel each other out and you end up getting a lot of internal friction. Output is only maximized when talent is exceptional and the direction is unified. Now, this obsession that he has with finding the best people spills over into every single hire. At SpaceX, the former director of talent, Dolly Singh, once said that his approach is like, find me the single best person on the freaking planet, then convince me why out of how many billion people on the planet, this is the person. And he even applied this to one of the cooks at SpaceX. So SpaceX built a yogurt booth on campus, and the instructions from Elon was, go to Pinkberry and find me the employee of the month. It wasn't about the yogurt. It was about building an organization where excellence was the standard at every level. Because culture is built by the aggregate behavior of every person inside of the building. What the vector sum principle teaches leaders is that your next hire is never just a role being filled. Every person either raises the collective standard or dilutes it. And when you hold both talent and mission alignment as non-negotiable criteria, then you stop managing people toward performance and you start attracting people who manage themselves towards it. And that's what every leader wants. So talent is the filter. Hire the best person on the planet for every seat, even for the one running the yogurt booth. But that's not the whole story. Because there's one thing that Elon Musk weighs even higher than talent, and getting it wrong is something he calls his single biggest mistake and the one mistake that he keeps making. So principle number two is hire for goodness of heart and not just brilliance of mind. There's a moment of unusual vulnerability that Elon Musk has repeated in interviews across the years, and he calls it the biggest mistake he has made and keeps making.
The biggest mistake in general that I've made, and I'm trying to correct for that, is to put too much of a weighting on somebody's talent and not enough on their personality. And I've made that mistake several times. In fact, then I would say, oh, gee, I'm not going to make that mistake again, and then I would make it again. And I think it actually matters whether somebody has a good heart. It really does. And I've made the mistake of thinking that sometimes it's just about the brain.
What Musk is pointing to is something that organizational psychologists have studied for decades. The effect that one person's character has on a team's collective performance is disproportionate to their individual contribution. He's often framed it in sporting terms. The best person on the team is not always the one who scores the most goals. It can be the person who assists the most. And if someone just wants the ball all the time, just wants to kick it at goal, that can actually be detrimental. Talent without character is corrosive. It can destroy a team. The most counterintuitive insight here is that character is the one thing a leader can't develop in someone else. You can teach domain knowledge, you can develop skills, you can coach judgment and communication, but the quality of someone's heart tends to be fixed. Whether they are fundamentally honest, Do they genuinely care about the work? Do they elevate the people around them? These things are difficult to instill in others, which means it's time to evaluate it before people walk through the door and not afterwards. So you find the talent, you check the character, you build a team of good people who are exceptional at what they do. And then there's a real question you have to answer. What makes those people give you everything they have? Because it's not just salary. And Musk is very clear that money sits near the bottom of that list. The real engine is something that most leaders never build. This brings us to principle number 3. Give people a mission bigger than the job description. There's a line that a former Tesla engineer used when describing what it felt like to work under Musk. He said working at Tesla was like being on the front lines of a battlefield. The pace was relentless and the expectations were almost impossibly high. And yet, thousands of people have left that organization and described it as one of the most meaningful experiences of their careers. The battlefield metaphor and the sense of meaning coexist, and that might not be an accident. Elon's central theory of motivation is that people give their best when they believe that the work matters. He described his approach to recruiting this way. He said, if you want to recruit talented and driven people, you have to state the mission, the problem that you are trying to solve. You have to clearly be willing to pour blood, sweat, and tears into it and have a convincing argument for why it matters. Motivation comes from 3 things: enjoying the work itself, fair financial rewards, and knowing the work will make a real difference in the world. This is not a new insight, by the way. It's something I talk about all the time when I teach leaders about transformational leadership. James McGregor Burns, the political scientist who first formalized the concept of transformational leadership, argued that the distinction between leaders and managers is that managers appeal to self-interest while leaders appeal to something bigger and something higher, to people's desire to contribute to building something that's beyond themselves. And it seems like Elon Musk has this sort of built into how he operates and built into his organizations as well. The only risk in applying this principle is that sometimes you might substitute performance management for inspiration and then call it leadership. A compelling mission is not a reason to avoid operational rigor. What it does, though, is it changes the source of someone's motivation from compliance to conviction. And teams driven by conviction simply solve harder problems for longer with less supervision. But conviction also gets tested the moment that something goes wrong. And this is where Musk excels. When his rockets explode, he doesn't hide it. He broadcasts it live to millions of people. And then his team celebrates. And that brings us to the last principle that I want to share with you. Principle number 4 is to treat failure as feedback, not as evidence of inadequacy. In 2008, SpaceX stood at the edge of extinction. The first 3 launches of the Falcon had failed. Musk has spent his entire fortune, all the proceeds from selling PayPal, to build both SpaceX and Tesla. He was broke. Well, kinda. But most of the people watching expected him to fold in those moments. But what happened instead became a foundational story, not just for SpaceX, but for how Musk understands the relationship between failure and growth. The way he describes it is that if things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. And SpaceX's development culture institutionalized this belief. The Starship rocket's early test flights ended in dramatic explosions. And these failures played out in public. They were broadcast live to millions of people. And the team celebrated them because every explosion was a data set. Every failure contained information about what the next version needed to become. Walter Isaacson's biography of Musk captured something pretty important about the psychology that runs underneath this. What Elon Musk is actually trying to do is to change the metrics that people use to evaluate themselves. He argued that what matters is whether a person has a good feedback loop, whether they can seek honest criticism from others and then use that to improve. He's often said that physics doesn't care about your hurt feelings. It cares about whether you got the rocket right. And what that reframing does is that it removes ego from the process. Failure is not a verdict on your worth. It's a measurement of the distance between where the work is now and where the work needs to be. Stagnation is the only unforgivable offense. Everything else can be iterated. I loved doing this deep dive into the CEO playbook of Elon Musk. If you enjoyed this, then also check out the playbook of NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang right here.